listening to Overwatch League Daily, your daily source for Overwatch League news, scores, and more. Here's your host, KickedTripod.
Good morning, Overwatch League fans, and welcome to Overwatch League Daily, your daily source for Overwatch League news, scores, and opinions. I am John KickedTripod Horseman, and here's your Overwatch League Daily episode for December 13th, 2017. On today's show, I'm joined by Overwatch caster and analyst Bren Hook to discuss the London Spitfire in light of their recent performance. Over the next few weeks, we'll be evaluating the performance of individual teams as we prepare for the inaugural season on January 10th. Fans had high hopes for the London Spitfire going into the preseason, as the expectations for the Cloud9-owned squad are to finish in the top two places with Seoul Dynasty. However, unlike Seoul, the Spitfire struggled in their preseason debut against the Los Angeles Gladiators, losing the series 3-2. So Bren, with expectations so high for the Spitfire, does losing a series in the preseason affect where the community should rank them?
To start with, I feel like people shouldn't put too much stock into any of the preseason games, partly because the teams all had to field every single member of the roster. Now, you can make the argument that for Spitfire, that shouldn't matter, because Spitfire is one of the only teams that have two whole-fielded rosters, two separate ones in the form of Jisoo Busan and the other gents. I know Fury came from Liquid and numerous other places for the rest of the team, that is. So you can make the argument that it shouldn't matter and you should pay attention to these preseason results, but even still, I feel like it's quite hard to really gather too much. However, I'm going to be going forward with the pretense that we are going to be assuming that these preseason matches actually do matter. And it is a bit of an issue. I mean, Spitfire, throughout their series against Gladiators, this is a series that they should have won very convincingly. A lot of people put Gladiators as one of the sort of lower tier teams in the Overwatch League. Now, myself personally, and I've said this to a couple of people, I've never in a public setting, so you can believe me or I don't really care. But I've always assumed and thought that Gladiators, if there was any team in the Overwatch League to be a dark horse, it would be the Gladiators roster, because the players on the team very much committed, very much confident in their own game plans, in their own game style, I should say. They're very mechanically skilled as well. I feel like the triple DPS composition that you can build with Gladiators players is absolutely filthy, as we saw in their match against Spitfire. So people are really kind of underestimating them in that regard. They are very much a dark horse, I feel like, in this league. However, Spitfire are a better team. In terms of paper, previous results, experience, all of these things all add up. The fact that they're not a newer roster, they should have won this series against them. And the reasons why they didn't were actually very simple, and it came down to very silly mistakes in a lot of ways. So if we take a look back at the first map, which was Junkertown. Junkertown's a map where you get very sort of different results because of the way the map is designed. It's much more open than other maps, which means you can get away with using cheese compositions. By cheese composition, I mean using the Orisa, the Bastion, the shields. Basically, you set up the Bastion on the cart, you shield them up, and it's very difficult to break out of this. Now, Gladiators came out with that composition. Spitfire on the defense, they were making silly little misplays. You need to come out with the assumption that teams are going to be running this Bastion composition because it's so common. And Gladiators, I should say Spitfires, they just completely misplayed. They tried to play the high ground, tried to play around Orisa shields. However, Gesture ended up misusing the Orisa shield. He placed it to the low ground, which got all of the tanks killed. So immediately, as soon as your tanks die on that first point, you're not even going to be able to really defend it. And it's very hard to contest it. So as soon as the ball gets rolling for this Bastion strategy on the cart, super hard to stop it. And we saw that throughout the entirety of Junkertown on that first map. They only got stopped in the final checkpoint, but even then, Spitfire, the GC Busan side of Spitfire, they weren't playing to the level that we know that they should be. Prophet was playing the Junkrat, wasn't particularly playing very well, I will say. He wasn't getting high value of his tires at all. I was watching the games, I watched them very recently, And he was going for the tanks when, the Junkrat Riptire is so powerful in the fact that you can insta-kill 200 HP targets very easily. But when you're running it into the Roadhog on Orisa, you're not going to be getting any kills at all. Not even that as well. Those are just two minor issues that I pointed out. The real major issues that's sort of overarching is the fact that GC Busan have a bit of a communication issue. Now, that's a bit unfair to say because you can't tell if a team's got communication issues unless you're actually in the communication, in Mumble, in Discord, whatever they use, with them whilst they're playing. However, there's definitely some sort of team issues that are going on behind the scenes. And I noticed this because on numerous times throughout this series against Gladiators, on all of the payload maps and the hybrid maps, so Numbani and Junkertown, they were very much sort of disjointed in the way they wanted to stall out the final checkpoint. Junkertown, they tried to stall it out. They had players up. They actually didn't even get onto the cart, so Gladiators got a fantastic time on that. And the same with Numbani as well. They couldn't really time them getting onto the cart properly. So they were really struggling with that one in terms of basically general team play. Now, on map number 2, when GC Busan got subbed out for all of the rest of the players, things were so much better, and it was on Horizon as well. Horizon is a map that you'd think for a team that focuses so much on team play, they should be able to be coming out on top. So, I mean, GC Busan should have been playing well enough to, just keep them in for Horizon. They'd be playing just as well. However, essentially, London Spitfires, they brought out the May pick, right? May was incredible against what Gladiators run. This is something that Johnny Reinforce pointed out to me, and the more I watch these preseason games, the more I completely agree with him. In the Western teams, they don't play a very what is the word I'm looking for here? God, you wouldn't think that commentating was my job. They play very reactionary off the back of picks. Pretty much all of the Western teams do, with the exception of a few, maybe like Dallas Fuel. They play very reactionary, so it's a real struggle to see to play against the May, especially a team like Spitfire when they're running the May wall, because you can completely disconnect the tanks from the DPSs. Especially like Gladiators in that map number 2, they were playing very passive. They were playing around the choke points, using the May wall and getting segregated up. The May was a massive problem for them, and she is fantastic at stalling in general with her ultimate Blizzard, just basically having the self heal as well, the invulnerability to just stagger out these points. Very, very difficult for Gladiators to try and break in with their reactionary playstyle that they have. So if I was to finish my point that I was going to make, but I rambled on for 6 minutes instead about the first 2 maps, I feel like this should affect where the community places them and ranks them. Absolutely. GC Busan did not play up to the level that we expected from them. The whole team was played here that we know from Apex Season 4. They weren't playing at that high level, and that's really the reasons I've already outlined here is the gist of it as to why we should be ranking them on this compared to other teams where they might have to run more unconventional player compositions and things. An example of this I would give would be Outlaw's recent performance, where they had to sub in Mendo when he hadn't had much sleep, when they hadn't practiced without Boink as well. That was another mistake they made on that Ilios section of the Outlaws game. Another example is the Shanghai Dragons. They haven't had much practice or scrim time, so maybe looking at their results, you can't judge them too much on this. However, Spitfire, this is a roster that has experience, that's been together for a long time. I'm talking about the GC Busan section of this roster, so they shouldn't be making the mistakes that they made in this match. You can definitely judge their performance, and I can assure you we're going to be seeing some changes compared on January the 10th when this team actually plays, because the coach, he's pissed. He's been posting all sorts of messages on social media. He is annoyed because I completely agree with his sentiment. They should not have been playing the way they did against Gladiators.
Where was the weak part of the Spitfire game plan against the Gladiators?
It's got to be in their payload and hybrid game style. And it's also, I'd say another weak portion is probably the Jisoo Busan roster on Spitfires. They are the weaker roster now from what we've seen. If we're only going off of the information we've been given in the preseason, they are the weaker roster. When we saw Raskau, Fury, Fisher, Hagopon, that's how you say it? I'm not too sure. News, Birdring, when they were playing on map number 2 on Horizon, they were fantastic. The team play was excellent. They were playing around the Maywall. They were segregating players. But Jisoo Busan, that's where they were struggling. they were really not having a good time. And it's the issues that I've already outlined in the overarching team play, which is the main thing that I'm really going to point out because it's so unlike them. That's the weakest section, I feel. It's going to be that their payload and their hybrid maps, the overarching team play, not really coordinating well enough to essentially get the holds, get the stalls going, which normally they are quite good at. But also, I didn't really see much misusing of ultimates. It was mainly just them not really being able to hold together a decent defense. That was the main issues that I saw.
If you were a coach, what would you focus on between now and the inaugural season?
Definitely getting GC Busan back up to scratch, back up to the level they were playing at, because this roster has so much talent from what we've seen. They've got a lot of experience as well. I don't know, it could have been a variety of issues that they had. It could have been that they were complacent coming up against Gladiators. Again, you can't tell that because you have to actually be within the mind of the players themselves. It's unfair to say that they took it a bit, laissez-faire, so to say. But it definitely seemed that way. It seemed like they weren't giving Gladiators the respect they were due and ultimately got punished for it. So yeah, definitely focusing on the team play of GC Busan. The sort of mix-up here of Kongdu Pantheria and Kongdu Pantheria, the other side of Spitfire, that actually seemed very good to me. The team play, the fragging potential as well, birdering was fantastic. Fury in particular, I want to point out, he is insane. He's one of the players that everyone needs to keep an eye on as well, because I actually rate him very highly on the D.Va. His D.Va is phenomenal. Phenomenal D.Va play. Definitely one of the best in the entirety of the Overwatch League. So that side of the roster, I feel like you don't really need to worry too much. And honestly, I can't really say, I can't really say of anything to focus on for that side of the roster because we never really saw them challenged. They kind of just rolled over Gladiators in the one map they played, and even against Shock, when that roster was fielded, they had a pretty easy time there as well.
Who do you think was the most valuable player for the London Spitfire in this preseason?
For me, it's got to be Fury. 100% of the way, it's got to be Fury. The man is an incredible D.Va. He's absolutely incredible. I was watching him the whole time, just trying to watch him in a peripheral vision. I noticed it first when it was on his perspective, but his game sense in terms of when to jump into the backlines, when to disjoint, when to boop off, say the Winston that's jumping onto your backlines and whatnot, is phenomenal. And he actually micromanages his abilities and his mech's health very well, much better than a lot of other D.Vas that I've seen. He knows when he's going to be getting low. He knows when to jump into the fray. If he gets caught off guard, he knows exactly the position to be in so that he doesn't get picked off immediately onto the ground. I noticed this a few times in the Gladiators game as well, when they were playing on Horizon. Fury, definitely the man to watch, definitely my MVP throughout the entirety of this Spitfire roster. Probably one of the best pickups they've actually got as well, and he came from Team Liquid, so a bit of an unknown quantity, didn't perform as well as people thought.
And that's going to do it for this episode of Overwatch League Daily. My thanks to Bren for sharing his insight with me this morning. Make sure to go follow him on Twitter at BrenCasts. The next episode will release tomorrow, December 14th, and will feature Overwatch Pacific Championship caster and analyst Kevin Averill Walker. That's going to do it for me for this first remote episode from Hawaii. Because it's the off-season and I'm getting married on Saturday, there will only be 3 episodes this week, but besides that, we're going full on to the inaugural season. Remember, you can find the show on any of your favorite podcast outlets, including iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Podcasts. We're on YouTube too. Click on the link in the show notes to find us. Want to stay in touch? Email me at overwatchleaguedaily@gmail.com, tweet me at OWLDailyShow, or join our Discord at discord.me/OWLDailyShow. Fun fact, we just hit 100 members in that Discord, so there's a lot of people hanging out and chatting. That's going to do it for this episode. We'll see you tomorrow.